Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latine and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Guess.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler Vale.
So this year, when we end a year, I always like to spend a little time of reflection. I think it's a really good habit to just at the end think back to everything that happened. And, the unfortunate part is our brains will be wired to go back and think of the ugly and how bad it was and whatever. But we need to do both. We need to think about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's right. And I think that reflection component is so important because so much can happen in any given year. It feels like in this last year, it was even more sort of, happened. And again, there's always great lessons to be learned and opportunities about sort of what to think about going forward. And, one of the things that we always like to think about is how is all of this stuff affecting you, our listeners, and in multiple ways, right? In career and in your home life. And so we're looking forward to just, having an opportunity to do a little bit of a download with you.
Yeah, there's a quote that says, you can't tell where you're going if you don't know where you've been.
I like that.
So let's talk about 2025, which, by the way, I still keep calling 2024, but it is not. It is 2025. So, we started out with a big political change.
Yeah.
We started off with, Donald Trump getting inaugurated. And immediately on the day of inauguration, Chicago began getting raided by ICE.
Yeah.
So we saw a lot of our small businesses take an impact right away in our community. I know sales were down 20 to 30%. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of just distrust or fear or I just doubts. And I always think back to what Mr. Rogers says, right? And he said, I'm getting emotional. He said, look for the helpers. And I think about all those beautiful people standing in corners, blowing whistles, doing, Whistlemania parties, organizing visits to our restaurants and our stores to help our community. And I just think that, if we look back, we can say, you know what, it was a really hard year to be a Latino in the U.S.
Absolutely. And you can tell,
Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, certain communities were obviously impacted more than others. And I think to your point about the helpers, I think back to the episode we had with Patricia, who came and told us about the amazing work that she was doing with the Little Village Chamber and trying to support a lot of those local small businesses with their marketing plans. And first and foremost, one of the things that we always love to do here at Corporate Cafecito is to just allow folks the opportunity to have the mic and to share their own the ways that they're supporting and just doing well. But, I remember, when she had decided actually to hold off on further publicizing her episode because she wanted to be thoughtful of the fact that so many of the businesses that she had been working with were really being impacted on a day-to-day basis. And, to think that someone who is out there, which of course she's one of many to your point, but to think that, that is a level of kind of sensitivity that people were sort of, trying to exert is, I think, amazing. And the fact that I just read recently that some of the business owners are starting to say that their business is finally starting to see, particularly in Little Village, some improvements is certainly, I think, just a great story in the making.
Yeah. Another thing that when we think about 2025 is the advancement of AI. We've had my cousin Sergio come on here and talk about, AI and everything it's doing. We're seeing it integrated now into university planning. We see it with, it's going to be one of those technologies that I have to learn because I'm refusing to be my parents. I'm refusing to be like, hazme otro, I'm like, no, I still need to learn it. I can't throw in the towel yet. But just using it and being open to it, but also the fear of what it's doing to our job market.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that stood out to me about what Sergio said was obviously the impact on efficiency, which is a great thing, but
Hmm.
obviously then that meant that conversely that there were less companies feeling that they needed to hire more people or certainly keep as many people on staff.
Right.
I mean, so that's one thing. But what really stood out to me was when he was saying that when AI starts to merge with the trades. Do you remember that part where he was like,
Yes.
construction and some of
Yeah.
this other stuff? Like that to me is just fascinating, and I feel like one of the things that he talked about was how, to your point, how quickly it accelerated. I mean, some of
Yes.
the things that he had predicted happened much faster, ended
Faster.
up happening,
Yeah.
but happened much faster. And so I can only think about what 2026 is going to be bringing us when it
Right.
comes to that aspect.
So learn,
Learn,
learn
learn. Yeah,
AI, grow
absolutely.
with it.
Yeah,
Don't sit this one out. This is not one we can sit out. But also learn how to, make it part of your routine or how to benefit from AI.
yeah.
Because I think that'll be part of how we morph in
I agree.
2026.
If you follow us on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
you probably see that I posted recently something about a first ever Latino AI summit. Um, when we're talking about not, we're it's easy to say learn, but I think what I'm loving about what I'm seeing is the fact that there are Latinos out there who are realizing that
They're
we don't
embracing it.
always
Yeah.
have a seat at the table and that is going to be important, and that in order to do that we need to make sure that we're looking at this in a sort of very focused way. And so if you can, please by all means attend. I think it's a very nominal fee. If you volunteer you can actually even do it for free, but I'm hoping that in 2026 we'll see a lot more of that,
Yeah.
because one thing to your point about how quickly it's happened is that um, when you're not at that seat, when you're not there to talk about how AI is being used or bias in AI
Hmm.
or any of these other things, it'll just,
Go
zoom right
ahead.
past you. Yeah.
One of the things when you were saying that it's the first ever Latino AI summit, and you said because we don't always have a seat at the table, that's another 2025 thing,
Mm-hmm.
is that with DE and I initiatives kind of fading away or being discouraged, we saw that there was less diversity hiring.
Yeah,
There was a
absolutely.
lesser focus on it. People, if you don't have to do it, we saw some companies chose not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It became a negative thing for a company to have DE and I in, like, to have federal
Yeah.
contracts or government contracts, military contracts. And so we saw the repercussions of that. Like, we saw major corporations back down, and we saw the companies that we believed in let us down, and that
How's
impacted
that
their buying
faring?
power,
Yeah, how's that faring? I mean, if you look at just the stock price of a lot of these companies ever since
Hmm.
they've decided to put out their sort of like statements where they're backing away from DE and I, um, they've seen some pretty massive, I would say, negative impact.
Yeah.
I just read the other day that at least in Illinois, Harley Davidson is going to be closing down their dealerships. And that was one of the first companies that had come out and actually kind of like reversed course. And so, obviously, I think you all know that there are some other pretty notable organizations out there. But to your point, one of the things that we've seen is that there have been a lot fewer statements in support of. So it wasn't just statements talking about how they were clawing
Right.
back some of this, but just also generally, a lot of those companies that have been supportive have decided to sort of turn inward and do a lot less of that external, either supporting or public advocacy of it. And I think for DE&I teams, it's become more about having to prove the ROI. And so there's more
Right.
ROI expectations. And, quite frankly, some of this stuff I think can be a little difficult to quantify.
Very.
And until all of a sudden you see that you've backed away from DE9, your sales are down pretty significantly.
Agreed. Agreed. So those were three things that hit us as like big things that happened in 2025, things that we'll see continue to evolve in 2026. But when we were thinking about like how we recap this, those were three of our big points for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think we've talked about this, we've
Mhm.
hit this a few times in the conversation, but the impact, I think, particularly to the Hispanic community, to the Latin community, um, has been, I think, it's in some cases it's still too soon to tell from a data perspective, but what I'm hearing from people anecdotally is that it is having a pretty significant impact. Mostly, unfortunately, not on the positive end of it. And so I think we'll probably see more of that data come through in 2026, where
Yes.
we'll have a clearer understanding of how that is potentially impacting Latinos in leadership positions, particularly in Fortune 500 companies, how that is impacting businesses,
Hmm.
financially, how that is, obviously we know the job market is tight, and when we're not going out and recruiting at HSIs or some of these other places to just even get access to this talent,
Right.
right?
Right.
So again, we're talking about a level playing field. That's going to obviously have potential repercussions, particularly because hiring slowed down.
Well, the Latino impact in the job place is huge.
Hmm.
One, we are a massive financial power in the
Absolutely.
US, right? We are a huge, huge financial contributor. Immigration status, not like,
Yeah,
doesn't matter. We spend our money and we make good
absolutely.
decisions and we open businesses. And so, this year again, we continue to lead small business openings.
Hmm.
The thing that people don't take into account is when you open up a small business, you might hire one, two people, right? If things go well, you expand it. So we are also a huge driver of jobs.
Agreed.
And then I think about our impact, not, to the workplace as well, is we are getting more visible. We are finding some champions. I see people that are getting recognized and I love their work because I'm like, yes, like you are representing all of us when you're on that stage. And I feel that the ones who it may be harder to get in,
Hmm.
but the ones who are in are shining brightly.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that that's a good segue into kind of the next point, which is what we've heard from some of you related to obviously workplace experience and even an entrepreneurship experience perspective. Because you're right. I mean, these two things are intertwined.
Hmm.
If Latinos continue to be the biggest driver of new growth of small businesses, then ideally they're able to hire more people, which means that
Right. We are job
job
creators.
creators, exactly.
Yes.
And I certainly have, I think, a lot more ears, and I know you do too from the work that you do. But in the corporate space, one of the things that I've heard is with job attrition obviously increasing and with less and less diversity hire happening, a lot more people are starting to see themselves again being kind of the only ones in the room.
Mhm.
And for folks who have either been there before and celebrated not having to be it, and then all of a sudden being that only in the room again, it's quite a sort of mentally draining and exhausting experience. And particularly because in many cases they're being seen as kind of the authority
Mhm.
and needing to speak for a larger population of people. And I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it's nice that we still have people that are obviously in the room, but it's not the fix or solution.
Right. And we're not seeing people coming in behind us that look like us because
Exactly.
the DE&I initiatives have kind of calmed down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to leave us out. But I also feel that we are paving our way.
Hmm.
And I see organizations popping up. This morning, I was at an organization and they support local businesses by offering them talent to train on the job, and they'll pay for that person's wages for a certain amount of time.
The organization
Yeah.
will. That's
And so I'm
amazing.
just like, okay, this is great. Like we're finding ways to help our community. And what I think that we do well, right? Corporate Cafecito was founded to help our community, to provide advice, to give you profiles of amazing Latins who have come in and like done amazing work, and we want to recognize them and also share their story of how to do it.
Hmm.
I have felt that there's more community at work.
I agree with you. I
Like,
think, I think if anything, not to, it's kind of like when people talk about COVID and they're like, oh, if one good thing came out of it. I hate saying that necessarily because, you know, overall, I don't think that this has been a great experience, particularly recently with what's been happening in the Chicagoland area around kind of the ICE raids and that work.
Chicagoland, Charlotte.
Yeah,
Right now, we have a heavy ICE presence in Minneapolis for
that's
the
right.
Somalian
Yeah, that's
community.
right.
So,
They've tried in New York a few times, but
I always tell people like this is not a Mexican problem. This
no.
is a everybody
Not at
problem.
all. But to your point, one of the things that I think I have seen and witnessed also is that community element coming together and saying, hey, we're going to
Yeah.
figure this out. It's whether it's the whistle or whether it's, I saw some beautiful stories about people going out and just shopping exclusively at, locations like Little Village, and
Hmm.
taking phone orders, because people couldn't open their storefronts. Like we get creative.
We do.
We get when we're entrepreneurial in that way. But I think it goes back to that cultural desire to be in community. And I'm so hopeful that that will obviously continue as we go forward.
Absolutely. And I feel like it has, you talk about the pandemic and, like not to say something good came out of it, but also like I think it taught us that when something bad happens, you have a choice,
Yeah,
right? You can stay there or you can
you
pivot.
can
You
figure
can
it out. Yeah,
do something different.
yeah,
One of my friends, her company, Enrique's Produce, they started doing a thing called La Canasta, where they dropped off essential foods to people who couldn't leave their house to go get
amazing.
groceries.
Love that.
And so I think that it forces bad times force us to get creative. And
Yeah,
good times we tend to sit on our laurels and be happy and just,
yeah,
but bad times force us to regroup. And I think in the workplace, it's going to be really important to stay diligent, to keep a project list of what you work on, your accomplishments, because we need to make sure that you're recognized for your talents, for
yes.
your contributions. And, while we are all replaceable, let's make sure we're not replaced.
Yeah, two things I think to that end is one of the trends that we've seen is that internal mobility is rising, which is
Hmm.
great
Yep.
because obviously less, companies as they're either having to downsize or they're having to right size, which is
Hmm.
a word that's or term that's used, very often as well. Um,
The non-negative term of
yeah,
downsizing.
exactly. They realize that, potentially going external there's going to be a premium,
Yep.
obviously, when it comes to that. And so, particularly because the job market is so tight, so a lot of folks are actually just doing are hiring internally. And so that I think presents a really good opportunity. And you talked about this earlier, but that skills diversification is going to be so critical and
Hmm.
essential because now you've seen folks obviously with that internal mobility there's the opportunity to potentially expand remits. And
Yep.
so, talking about, what we're hearing and what we're seeing, that's another thing that obviously is, I think, going to be carrying and moving forward into 2026. Um, One thing around the workplace too that I think
Yes.
has been really challenging for folks is the pressure to stay politically neutral.
It's been so hard. And I do that. I try to take a very neutral stance because I never know who's in the room
Right.
or like how it's going to impact my contracts
Yeah.
or
Sure.
my client relationships. And also, I tell myself, like, I'm here for professional reasons, not for personal reasons. Um, you know, I I walk into the room and I kind of, but there was a time when one of my clients said, "Would you run this campaign right now?"
Mm,
And I said, "Are you asking me as a consultant or are you asking me as a woman of color?" And she said, "As a woman of color." And I was like, "I would not."
mm.
And it's like I hesitated even to say that answer, and I know a lot of times we try to not introduce politics, and I would say as a general like rule, like don't do that. Don't
Yeah.
bring politics to work. Don't bring religion beliefs to work. Unless you work in a religious organization.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say like we should go in, a lo que venimos.
Mm.
But now we find that some of this political environment or the political landscape is impacting the
Yeah,
workplace.
it's in some ways, unfortunately, Naila, you kind of can't escape it.
Hmm.
That example is interesting because typically it's like, well, is it for what you're paying me to do, or
Yeah. Are you
it's
asking me
like,
as a friend?
ugh, right?
Yeah.
And so in that situation, it is interesting, but I think particularly for Latinos, as I've spoken to a lot of folks in the corporate space, some of the things that they feel that they're missing are their companies, being more outspoken about, for example, what's happening with some of the ICE raids, and how in some of these cases they realize that some of their even coworkers or maybe even family members are being impacted. They're having to show up to work even though there was just a raid maybe in their
Mm-hmm.
community, or some of the businesses that they support, some of those folks may have been detained and potentially deported. And so, um, I think for a long time there was this kind of sense that corporations also had a duty or a responsibility to kind of speak up, when around things that are typically deemed as sort of injustices.
Mm-hmm.
But more than anything, what I find is that people say, this is impacting me, it's impacting my community every day, and I,
Yes.
I feel like I can't speak about it. And it's hard for me to show up. It's hard for me to show up. So what do you
Yeah, it's
say?
it's
What do you
hard for me to
say?
show up authentically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, I would say this. I compartmentalize
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like I'm being brought in to do this job.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to be able to go fill community fridges and deliver baskets of groceries and provide coats for people who are cold, if I want to make sure that I'm showing my role modeling to my kids, then I have to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Ooh, that's
I
yeah, that's
I tell
powerful.
myself like, okay, I'm gonna do this so I can do that.
Yeah,
Um, and so I try 100%
yeah.
not to bring politics to work. I don't think it's the right place for it. One of the things I would say is, we have to remember that if we bring it in, they can
Others
bring it
can
in
bring it in.
too.
Yeah,
And so it's like, do we want that? Do we,
yeah.
like, because it's great when we all agree, but it sucks when you don't,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so if we bring it into the workplace, you have to also accept that someone else may have a different opinion and they're going to share it with you, and it
Agreed.
is equally valid.
Agreed. I think this is where a personal coach or a career coach is really
Hmm.
important, because sometimes you just need to sort of talk it through,
Hmm.
and then ideally, hopefully, you clear your mind and you kind of get into a better headspace. Obviously, we've been big advocates here,
Hmm.
when it comes to mental health, and obviously, we both openly talked about having going to
Yep. I
therapy,
went today.
which is really important, but. I think one thing that's interesting is you're talking about this from the perspective of an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And I think one of the other things that I
True.
hear is
Yeah.
obviously that there are folks who are in leadership positions in some of these companies who are getting frustrated that they aren't maybe necessarily seeing as
Do
much
you remember?
advocacy.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah.
cut you off. Do you remember when there was a campaign in the workplace where you could put like a certain thing on your door and it said, "I am a safe space."
Oh, I've seen things similar
Yeah.
to that. Yeah.
And it was like, you could come talk to me about whatever. I'm a safe
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
And maybe it's time to bring that back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and whether it's a sponsor or a mentor,
Hmm.
particularly even at work, obviously someone who is a safe space for you to be able to talk about those. At any rate, having someone to be able to bounce these
Hmm.
things off you. But I would also say if it is vital to your work, I mean, you also said something that was really important, particularly in the case about a campaign. Um, you know, sometimes that does get political, but if it's not the best decision for the business, I think there's a way to potentially talk about that,
Yeah.
and still, highlight those things. Speaking of pressures at work, one of the topics that we had was around being a sandwich generation.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that a lot this
And
year. And you know what? It has come up a gazillion times. Like, I've talked to so many people who are like, yes, like
yeah,
that's 100% what I'm doing. I'm taking care of my parents, taking care of my kids. And, we had them later than our parents. And our parents, they're getting older. And I think, we have, I'm going to kind of merge the two topics because we have a lot of cultural guilt,
mm-hmm,
right? We don't want to speak up sometimes in the workplace porque me dejan salirme un poquito temprano para ir por
mm-hmm,
mis niños.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like I get to take my mom to her physical therapy. So you know what? I might overlook this
Yeah.
because,
Yep.
you know, they're good to me and other things. And that's something that I was taught by my parents. You like to si te tratan bien and whatever. And it's like, maybe we overlook a lot because
Yeah.
we feel that, like, I would say gratitude and guilt, right?
Sure.
We're
I
grateful
always,
for the flexibility we
yeah.
have, but we feel guilty to sometimes speak up because we're grateful.
I think in our community, that sense of like, don't bite the hand that feeds you is also
Oh, yeah.
very, very
Mm-hmm.
prevalent. Um, and a lot of that comes from the fact that I think for a long time we're sort of scarcity, like we're just
Yeah,
so like scarcity prone, except at work. In our family lives, like in our home lives, we're always talking about how grateful we are for the abundance of what we have, or just even things like
right.
health and whatever it is. But when it comes to work, we're like, don't bite the hand that feeds
Yeah,
you,
just take it.
and just take
You
it.
know what's so funny is that I was literally there was someone online and she posted anonymously and she said, you know, I hesitate posting positive things because I don't want to make other people feel bad.
Mm,
And I replied, like, no, please post positive things. We need to make sure that we share the wins. In our culture, we never want to make someone else feel bad, but we also sometimes limit our mobility because we don't see it as achievable because we don't know anyone did it, even
yeah.
though other people have done it, but we don't share it. So,
I remember we had a whole
yeah,
episode about that guilt, right?
yeah,
Guilt of just sharing some of the wins, or bringing people along, whether it's your family or your friends, into the successes that you've had. And I think particularly this year, that has felt even harder.
okay. So we had said at the beginning that we were going to do three things.
Yeah.
One
Oh, I was
is
like, yeah, we've talked about quite a few things.
yeah. So, because you just brought me to that, it's like one is, was it what we learned?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. So we're gonna wrap up with, yeah, what we've learned, what we're getting rid of for
Hmm.
2026. And then hold on, let's get and one new okay, so one thing we're leaving behind from
Yes.
2025, one lesson that we're taking into 2026, and one intention for the new year.
Okay. So the thing I'm gonna try to leave behind,
Okay.
I'm gonna work really hard at it, is the cultural guilt.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to, yeah, I'm gonna try to shine brightly.
So you're gonna model,
Yes.
you're gonna let it go by
Hmm.
modeling it
Hmm.
for other people,
Hmm.
is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Or that's my challenge to you.
Yeah. I'm gonna.
You're always challenging
I
me
know.
in a good
I
way,
know.
so I'm gonna challenge you.
I'm gonna try. That one will be very hard for me.
Why?
Um, you know what I do? I love celebrating other people. I
Uh-huh.
find it hard to celebrate me. And I don't mean like celebrate me. I'm very proud of what I've done, my
Yeah.
accomplishments. I share them with people.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I could do a better job
Yeah.
of sharing, like, you know what, I did this and then this happened. And so
Yeah.
I think maybe there's a way to do that. And that's actually something my therapist talks to me about.
That's great.
As she says, don't make yourself small to make someone else bigger.
But and the thing is, I don't think you do that to make other people bigger. I think, and I will say, I mean, I think part of the challenge for me is always feeling like I'm gloating.
Yeah.
But
It
it's
feels like
so I
gloating,
need
right?
to
Yeah, it's
figure
like,
that out too. But I think the one thing, just from the story that you said, when someone felt like they needed to post anonymously, yeah, it's great to challenge someone to say, no, like, shine bright. But I think the way we do
mhm.
that, like, to actually help people feel that they can do that, is by modeling it.
Yeah, no, you're right. So
So,
I'm going to
um,
work on that one.
I will help you if you need to
Yeah.
bounce ideas. Just let me know. One thing that I think I want to leave behind from 2025 is, um, taking things so personally.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Um,
That's a good one.
it's been a little bit of a rough year. It's been an interesting year, a lot of discovery, throughout the process. But one thing I've realized is that there's a lot that is broken.
Yes, so
Um,
much broken.
and um, and I think it's hard to ask for people to fix things when a lot of people right now are sort of like pouring out of empty cups,
Hmm.
or trying to pour out of empty cups. And so I don't see that there's necessarily kind of the same disposition as I had probably seen in previous years, where people are like, "Oh, here's a problem. Let's figure out how to fix it."
Hmm.
And so sometimes I tend to think that that's about me, and then that sort of has you spinning.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to just realize the fact that there are definitely some things that are broken and need to be fixed, and some of that is just way outside
Yeah.
of my control.
Yeah, it's not you.
Yeah. So what's one lesson that you're taking into 2026?
One thing I'm going to take to 2026. Oh my God. You know what? Right now that you said filling your cup, um, I I do things to fill my cup. And I think I need to continue that. I know I need to continue that. One of the things I do is I get a monthly massage.
Yes.
And so it
Love it.
helps me. And my, my masseuse is an hour away from my house.
Oh wow.
And the reason why, one, she's amazing. But two, I listen to a podcast, Corporate Cafecito. I
That's
don't
right.
listen to I don't listen to
We
myself
do.
except when I'm editing. But, but also like, it gives me time to like listen to something, listen to music. I get into the mindset of like I'm gonna go relax.
You're
It takes me out of
disconnecting.
my house
Yeah.
early. I do them early mornings, and then by the time I come back, it's like lunchtime, and it puts me in a really good spot,
Yeah.
and it also makes me save that spot to not give it away to someone else. So I continue to I'm starting a book club
That's
for
awesome.
January because I feel like I want to read. I have a group of women who are amazing, and they're going to be in the book club too. And we all decided like we would read one book a month, and we were going to have two check-ins, and we're going to make it super easy. So I think I'm going to continue to find ways to fill my cup because you're right. We can't help others if you got to put on your
If you're
mask
running on empty,
first
yep.
before you help
That
someone
car's not gonna
else.
run if
Yeah.
your fit's on empty,
So
if your
I'm going to
tank's on
carry
empty.
that forward to next
Yeah.
year too. How about you?
I think for 2026, one of the things that I want, or one of the lessons that I want to take into 2026 is um, not to panic.
Mm.
You know, to continue to be really thoughtful and
Yeah.
intentional. When I pause, it's a different kind of pause than what you're talking about, which I love. I do plenty of that too, or I have in the past, and I know how amazing that can be for your mental health and physically, right?
Hmm.
But you know, there's something about intentionality. I think that sometimes you sort of forget as
Yeah.
you're going.
Yep.
And I want to be able to be more deliberate about pausing and really thinking through what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What type of impact is there for me, for my community, for my family? Just
Yeah.
just go through that. And I think I've done this before once or twice, but I really am just thinking about getting back into journaling. I don't journal, and it's just an opportunity to kind of pause and
Yeah.
reflect.
And
And
just
so,
write it down or.
I've started. It's stop and go, but for the most part, I feel like I like it
Mhm.
because when I open up my notebook, I have no idea what I'm going to write about.
Right.
And most of the times, sometimes I'm like, oh, I know exactly what I want to
Yeah.
journal
Like,
about. But for
oh,
the most part, I'm like,
can't
I
wait
don't
to write
know.
this down.
But that exercise, one of the things that my therapist has told me about is to just like let silence be and allow yourself the opportunity. So even if it's just that moment of reflecting
Hmm.
about like, what am I going to put down on these pages? I think it's going to help me really think
Yep.
through and allow things to surface. So
All right. And one
one
intention
intention.
for the new year.
Yeah.
I'm not really good with intentions. I don't know what they're supposed to be. So I'm just going to say something and you can be like, that's not an intention. But my intention is to believe.
Hmm.
Just believe in others, believe in myself, go in with like a really open heart of belief. And like I think when we believe, we give someone like the benefit of the doubt and sometimes in our family or in our friendships we try to analyze
Mm-hmm.
like why did Carlos say that to me, and if you just say like, hey, I'm gonna skip this, I'm just gonna be like, okay, it just wasn't like Carlos couldn't make it,
Yeah.
and not go into this novela.
Overthinking or yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm just gonna. I'm just gonna believe everything at face value.
Okay.
And you know what? If someone's lying or someone's trying to take advantage, that's on them. That's not on me.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, you can't. We've talked about this before, but like you only have so much headspace,
Hmm.
and if you're giving it out, just handing it out on things that just aren't
Yeah.
going to really make an impact necessarily on you and others, then you're not putting it on the right things.
Hmm.
You know, so I'm totally with you. It's like I don't want to give that energy
Yeah.
away.
I'm just gonna believe what people tell me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think an intention for me for 2026 is um, I intend to get a lot more involved in community again. And I think, you know, it's again easy when you're raising a kid and you're doing all these other things to just all of a sudden want to turn like inward. And that's not to say that you don't do a thing or two here and there, but um, you know, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been doing a lot more meditating and just kind of, you know, going through my process has been like community is so damn
Oh,
important.
community is super important. Yeah.
And, you know, it's not about what community can give to me, it's about what I can give to community. And I think then the rest will follow. And so my intention this year is really to just get a lot more involved in community and do more of those things that will fill my cup outside of the family and work life that
Yeah.
I think I already do. So
And I will say the intention for Corporate Cafecito for 2026 is to continue to build community with you,
absolutely.
introduce you to amazing Latinas who are out there making it happen, to, show you by sharing role models and experiences, and by also having sessions like this where we kind of just talk about these topics so that we can continue to grow together cohesively and forward.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think our platform has stood for visibility and access and, you know,
Mhm.
leadership and obviously community. And so we want to thank all of you for just being a part of this movement. I mean, this
Mhm.
really is
Yeah.
obviously a movement where, you know, sometimes we talk about us and sometimes we talk about what's happening in our lives. But more importantly, it's a platform that we like to give to others to be able
Mhm.
to talk about how they're doing amazing
How they
things
did it.
in their
Yeah.
work as entrepreneurs or in their corporate, you know, corporate lives. But more importantly, everyone that we bring on this show is doing something for their community in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And that means a lot to us, and hopefully that means a lot to you
Yeah.
as well. So, you know, and we invite you obviously to continue to reach out to us if you think that there's a great topic or if you want to come on, you know, on the show because we'd love to just continue to do all the things we just talked about.
Exactly. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of our lives and our community. And we'll see you in 2026.